Welcome to the wonderful world of dodgy movies. I'm your host, movie and TV Mistress. This week I watched
Invaders from Mars.
Yeah. So, this week, I watched
Invaders from Mars.
Yeah, I watched a 1953 film called that. The problem with the title is you can't help but think of pigs in space when you hear the title being said like
Invaders from Mars.
So, 1950s. Let's get down to this, shall we? 1950s was a very, very historical time. Well, it was history. But in the 50s, in 1953 to be precise when this film came out, beginning of the year, the hydrogen bomb had been created. UFO'S had been picked up on. We'd already had a couple of sci-fi films that had come out in the early 50s, like The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Thing from Another World. But in 1953 we seem to get quite a bit of these. But this was the very first film to deal with abduction, implants, pretty much everything that you now hear whenever somebody tells you a UFO story. So you remember when you watched X-Files and everyone was like going, yeah, I was abducted by aliens, they did some weird experiments on me, they probed me and they stuck stuff in my neck. Invaders from Mars did that. There was the Russian, or the Red Fret, or the Red Scare, or whatever it was called. It was a very strange time in the 50s. So their way of dealing with it, as many generations have, is to take the story of the politics and the propaganda of the time and give it a different face. Make it not so obvious that we're dealing with communism and invasion by an enemy force. So in this film, of course, and any other sci-fi film of the 50s, the invasion was Martians. You know, that red planet. Sounds a bit like, you know, the Red Scare. Just saying. As I mentioned, there were some other sci-fi films that came before it, but this came out 3 years prior to the film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Right, which one? Yeah, there was many, but the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Kevin McCarthy running down the street screaming, "They're here, they're here!" which everyone associates with the invasion movies, was beaten by this.
Gee whiz!
Invaders from Mars. He saw them land from outer space. He saw them capture innocent people only to destroy. Father turned against son. People changed into strange, weird animals. A general of the army becomes a saboteur. Trusted police turned into arsonists. The boy's parents changed into killers.
But nobody's getting anywhere out there. Nobody can locate anything. Anybody. The Martians. We've got to start the...
Invaders from Mars, capturing humans at will for their own sinister purposes, turning them into diabolical instruments of destruction. Invaders from Mars, weird, fantastic beings of a superintelligence, ruling a race of synthetic humans and pitting them against mankind's dream to conquer the universe.
Come on, step on it. Search every tunnel. We gotta find Renault and the kid. When the colonel gives the signal, get back here on the double.
Random discussion about apparently Martians would live underground on Mars because there's no decent thing above ground, so they must live underground on Mars, and that they would have slaves that are mutants. How the hell the astronomer knows this, I don't know. But everything he just said is it comes to pass, because the rest of the movie, when we finally get to see the
Invaders from Mars!
When we finally get to see them, we finally meet the main alien who lives in a little bubble. I mean, it's about... he's got a massive head, little tiny arms, and he has some giant mutants that clearly have zips up the back of them, but you know, whatever. Anyway, we get to the end of the movie and you're like, oh my god, and then it's running away from an explosion because they've just planted loads of bombs around the UFO underground, and they're running and it's like, oh, just blow up already. And then, spoilers, in the original version of this film, there's a twist ending. It was all a dream. Or was it? Yeah, so basically the kid wakes up and his parents are fine. And turns out the entire thing we've just watched was a dream. This was the original ending. And then he goes back to sleep, his parents go back to bed, and then there's a loud bang. And oh no, look, there's the UFO from the start of the movie, and it feels like we're just going in a loop of this film, and it's just, I don't want to watch a loop of this film. No. Why am I saying that's the original ending? Well, the Brits, being the Brits back in the 50s, didn't like that ending. No. Even though it'd been released in America and everything. No, they decided, no, that's not good enough for us. We want some extra scenes put into this film, and we want the ending changed. So, I haven't seen that version. However, what I have read up on that version of the ending, there's, and some extra scenes, there's some very bad continuity in regards to the length of the kid's hair, the age of the kid in certain scenes early in the movie, ties being there, being untied, then being tied, jumpers appearing and then disappearing between cuts of the same scene. And then the ending. So the kid wakes up after the explosion. So it's starting the same way as the original ending. But no, at the door, it's not his parents. It's the doctor and the astronomer. And his parents are in hospital. They've removed the chip from their neck. So basically everything did happen. I guess the Brits wanted it to be real rather than to be all a dream. I guess there's something to be said for both endings. I don't really know what to say. I mean, I kind of thought, well, that's an interesting ending. I mean, the film is interesting at the start, and it's interesting at the end. It's just the middle loses me because of all the stock footage, and there doesn't seem to be a set thing going on. It just feels very like I'm watching propaganda in the middle. This is propaganda of, look, how America is super strong and how we can defeat any threat, including aliens from Mars. And I get that maybe that was the point of the 50s sci-fi films as well. There was a bit of propaganda in there to show how strong America was against the Russians or against Chinese and the Red Threat and communism. What I didn't know was, I must have missed this in the 80s, but there was a remake of this. Yes, there was a remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the 70s, but there was a remake of Invaders from Mars in the 1980s, directed by Tobe Hooper, the same guy behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And
Salem's Lot!
I have to say, it intrigues me, but it didn't do so well. It came right after another film by Tobe Hooper called Life Force. Again, aliens. Vampire aliens in that one, and a lot of nudity. So, considering Tobe Hooper's filmography tends to be more adult. I'm intrigued. At some point I will have to watch the remake of this film. And hopefully, in the 80s, the middle part wasn't as boring. And didn't use as much stock footage, because I sat there going, are we going to get to a story at this point? Because I feel like we've just missed the story. I know I said in my last video that I'd like to watch some serious 50s films to see how they did it. And how could people take those films seriously. When you're watching this film, it is serious. It's not played for laughs. It's not like the campy... That scene in Explorers when you see Robert Picardo on screen doing a 50s B-movie sci-fi film. This was in colour, whereas Invasions of the Body Snatchers is in black and white. It's played straight. The only thing that surprised me was that the kid was believed from the start by the Doctor and by the Army. It took a whole movie of Monster Squad for the Army to turn up and help the Monster Squad. By that point, the Monster Squad had defeated the monsters. Would I watch it again? Nah. Would I recommend you watch it? I don't know. Are you interested in 50s propaganda sci-fi films about the Red Menace from Mars? In the 50s, it was very of its time. The 80s is very of its time. And in the 80s, that was when we were going back to the 50s. So 30 years difference. Clearly, because we remade this film in the 80s, there was Back to the Future. There was Peggy Sue Got Married. And there was the Grease movies. Everything was going back to the 50s and the 80s. And now, 30 years after Back to the Future and all the 80s, we are now heading back into the 80s. With all these movies and TV shows that are out. And, hey, we might even get a reboot, hopefully directed by the star herself, Leah Thompson, of Howard the Duck. That would be awesome. But I kind of want Howard to look like he did in 1985 rather than the CGI Howard from Guardians. But that's my opinion, and I'm allowed that, and you're allowed yours. So, that was my review of
Invaders from Mars.
Remember what I say, folks. There's a lot of dodgy films out there. And hit that subscribe button. Comment down below. Thumbs up if you like it. And I'll see y'all next week for another film. I just haven't decided which one yet.
Invaders from Mars!
I really need to get that checked out. Bye!